Okay, welcome back. So we're being joined now by Greg Law. It's the first time he's appeared today. He's one of our AOS specialists here at Rocky Mountain Equipment. He's going to, along with John, go over some of the ways to optimize some of the legacy type machines and some of the older machines and how to get them to run proper and get the most out of your combine. So with that, I'll leave it up to John and Greg, and they'll take you for the next 20, 30 minutes.
Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start at the front of the combine. I'm going to talk about probably new stuff and legacy stuff. We'll kind of try and mix it all together here because a lot of the stuff is similar between the two. First of all, we'll start with the very front here with the face plate and with hooking up a header. So these little hooks right here, once you've got the header on here, these hooks here will latch into the header and will hold the header from falling off. Now there is some adjustment on the left-hand side of the machine here on this handle here. There's some adjustments here to get the latch to lock into on the header correctly. Some headers will actually have the ability to adjust the pin. As part of the adjustment, there would be like a pin right here on the header that it would latch into. On some headers, you can actually adjust that, and that's part of the adjustment. You want to make sure that that's adjusted correctly so that the header doesn't fall off of the feeder house. So with the hooking up of the header, so we're going to pick it up. We're going to latch that on there. We'll take our hydraulics. And they're a one-point hookup, and there's just a lever on the header that would over-center and latch them into place. Once that's done up, then you've got your electrical harness. Now the electrical harness would have a plug that you would just hook into on the header. Now what I recommend with this, when you're hooking this one up, is to actually take this and loop it through here, through this handle right here on this header latch, and then hook it up. The reason for that is that when you go to unhook the head, when you undo the latch, it will only go back so far, and it won't actually even unlatch, and the harness will actually physically be in the way. And that's a good thing, because you won't forget to unhook this at that point. I bring this up because, well, it's happened. So just keep that in mind when you're hooking up a header, that it's a good idea to run your electrical harness through here.
And something else to add to when you're hooking up your headers, anytime you go to hook up your electronics, make sure you shut the combine off. There is header recognition modules on every header, and if you hook your power plug up with the combine running, it's still going to think you have your previous head on. So when you pick the header up, shut the combine off, then go out, connect your electrical, connect your hydraulics, and it will then recognize the stored values in your straight cut header or your pickup head. So
it's always a good idea, regardless of the connector on the combine, if you have to open it up and check something out, to always make sure the key is off. You don't ever want to hook and unhook a harness with power flowing through the pins, because you can cause arcing across the pins, and that's never a good thing, to burn the pins. It's always a good idea when you're doing this to just shut the engine off. And I believe, at least you used to be able to, if for some reason you didn't follow my instructions a minute ago and you did hurt this, you can actually buy the connector through parts, and the service manual will have all the pin layout to get this back together again. You don't have to buy the whole harness. It can be repaired. Okay, so just going around the feeder house here, if you guys want to come in here with that camera, I just want to show that sleeve that I talked about earlier, what I'd mentioned for the feeder chain. This is the sleeve right here that I talked about. There was a question earlier about this for when to pull a feeder, a link out of the chain. This is the sleeve here that I was talking about. So as you tighten the chain up, this will actually tighten down, and this gap will go away. And when you get down on this sleeve, that's when it's time to pull a half link out of the chain. Okay. This is a DFR machine, so we've got our DFR drum right here. This here is our lever for opening the sump and dumping the rocks out. And it's just as simple as just pushing up on it. You push up on it, you dump the rocks out, pull down, close it, and you're done. Now, somebody had asked the question too earlier is how do we know when to open this? Is there a sensor on it that tells us when it's full? We already addressed that. We said no. I'm going to answer one more question here. No, there is not a sensor on this to tell you if it's open or not. So in the open position, you can actually combine with this open. So just be aware of that. There isn't a sensor on this, at least not yet. I think that's something that's in the works, but just something to be aware of.
On another piece of information to keep in mind, in I think it was model year 2017.
Yep.
They changed the main drive shaft for the head
Down here.
to a 1,000 spline from a 540. So make sure if you've traded combines or traded headers, before you get to the field or put your header on for the first time, just double check that you got the right PTO shafts to fit the combine that you currently own. It's a quick change on your half shaft of your header. You can change the yoke as well.
Yep.
So there is options. You don't have to buy the whole PTO shaft.
Yep.
So just a quick check before you head for the field.
And no cheater shafts.
Yes.
Please don't put a cheater shaft in there. It does not work. Okay, I guess moving around the side of the machine here. I'm just going to kick this ladder out of the way. Oh, don't go too far. Right in here, we're going to talk about the drive wheels for a minute. So on our drive wheels here, we've got all our bolts in here. Now this was all torqued and set up correctly at PDI, but just like anything, they're wheel bolts and they do need to be rechecked from time to time. The recommended check on them from new is to check them daily until they retain their torque. Sometimes that might be a little bit hard to do, but the message that I want to give here is that those do need to be checked, and they should probably be checked at minimum before the season starts. Reason for that is there can be a bolt that's still here. It looks fine when you do a visual check, but when you put a wrench to it, if there's an issue with the bolt, it will break. And I'd rather you find that before harvest starts than find out halfway through harvest that you've got wheel bolts that are failing on you. So it's a good idea to check these from time to time, just to make sure, also to make sure that they're properly tightened, because you don't want to lose these wheels in the field.
And typically on PDI, we will take a paint pen and we'll draw a line and mark it. So it'll be a quick glance too to see if one of the wheel nuts is backed off.
Yeah. Now, before we move on, somebody's going to come back to me and say, well, what do I torque them to? Follow the instructions in your operator's manual for your model of combine, because over the years that number has changed. Some of them were a certain torque and these ones are a different one. It just depends on the wheel and nut setup in here and the age of the machine. So what I would say is make sure you're following the instructions in your operator's manual. And if you're having troubles getting it dealt with and figuring it out, please phone your service department. They'll help you out with it. This is a critical one. Don't overlook this. Okay? You want to talk about the RAS bars?
So part of your preseason check, we're getting closer to harvest. A lot of the harvest last year was very tough thrashing. There was a lot of wear on certain items. Here's a comparison to a new S-Cube Raspar rotor and a used one. So CR combines are built on grain to grain thrashing. So when you got worn out components like this, to me this causes grain loss. So just have a quick look at your combines. Pull the pull the rotor or pull the concave out and have a quick look. I mean, it's a 10-minute job. If these are worn, contact your service department or parts department and get some replacements. They definitely more than pay for themselves. So.
It's kind of the same story for the concave itself too. If it's badly worn as well too,
Yep.
it can
Yep.
cause that. So the combination of the two. So sometimes a new set of rasp bars and a new concave would almost essentially make it a brand new combine
New
again.
combine. Yep.
In the part that, or the part of the combine that matters the most. So. Okay, we've got some components laying out here. We've already talked about these rethrash doors. Right here we've got, there's these two plates right here. These are our awning plates that would go in the underneath the concave to blank them out. Greg's going to demonstrate where they go.
So typically, we will always blank off the front third. There may be scenarios where you're in some lighter crop that you may see benefit with the blank offs in the first and second. This is all variant on your crop and typically only used in wheat is the main benefit. I did see last year of some benefit with pod shatter canola of having a segment in the middle of the concave. So when you go to insert these, on the back side of the concave, there's actually an ear that will clip down over top of these. I've pulled many of these out and they'll be completely flattened out. And that is caused from not being caught on the back side of the concave. So when you go to install these, just follow the concave around. Just follow it all the way around and eventually you'll get to that point where they'll pop right up in there. So just something to keep an eye on when you install them. Anything to add to that?
The only thing I was going to add to that is generally, I would say only put these in as needed. If you can get away without these in there, by all means.
Yeah.
But I have a funny feeling the way the crop's looking this year, these might get used a little more than normal. Just due to the fact that it's going to be a lighter crop, just to hold material in the rotors to get them to do the job they need to do. So,
If you're getting white caps in your
Yeah.
wheat, that's usually a good sign that you need those. So.
yeah. Yeah. So there's two per side. No more than, and always put them in either the front or the middle section. Don't put them on the back.
On the back, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I asked earlier, but you didn't answer. Can you change the segments in a rotor without balancing? Doing it inside the line?
So we've got a question here, and what it is so here's the scenario. We've got some rotors that have wore out rasp bars. We need to replace them with new ones. So the question is can we just replace them without balancing the rotors? And I'm going to throw that one at Greg because he works in the dealer. What do you guys typically recommend for that?
Typically, when we're changing all the rasp bars, we will pull the rotors. There's your opportunity to change them. If you're just doing leading rasp bars, sometimes you can roll the dice and you're okay. You'll know right away. When you put the rotors in neutral, you spin them, and if they keep coming back to that same spot, chances are they're going to vibrate. Sometimes the vibration goes away, but normally it gets worse. So it's kind of if you do one, because what happens on the back side of these is this pocket will be right full of dirt. So when the rotors are out and you're replacing all of these, they all come off. So all that dirt is loosened up. But then if you're only changing one or two, say you damaged one, well, chances are your rotors are going to vibrate because there's still dirt on the other two opposite of the original one. So Every scenario is a little different. If you're lucky, yeah, you can change the leading ones and not have to pull the rotor.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't sell them individually. You'll have to buy them in a set of 3. There'll be a match set of 3,
Match
so
set,
you would
yep.
change all 3 all the way around.
Yep.
So
But
you can roll
typically,
the
if you're
dice and
changing
try
them
it.
all,
Yeah.
the rotors you're at a stage where the rotors are probably coming out. So
Yeah.
That's the same with twin pitch?
twin pitch as well. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. The next thing that's laying here, it was removed just for access into the machine here. We've got a cover here. Now this cover goes at the top of the tailings auger here. It just fits into place up here. Now, okay. Now what I'm going to say about this is it's off, so we're going to talk about it. This little pin that's right here is designed to lock it in place. On some of the older machines, there was a point, I don't remember when we actually started doing this, there's older machines that we never even put this on. This is to keep it from popping off. The message I'm going to give you is this, is that you need to figure out a way to tie these up somehow. Because what can happen if these pop off, now just imagine this, you're in the field, this is in here, it pops off. Now you got to think this door's closed. This door's closed and the shield's down. This pops off, it's going to get funneled right down into the cleaning fan. And this is going to cause some major damage if it falls down in there. So my message is this, be creative, I don't care, you can do whatever you want, but just through here and tie it up to this handle up here. Sometimes a long black zip tie works. Yep. I've seen just cheap swing set chain from PV Mart or tarp strap, anything. Just be creative. Tie this up somehow so that it can't fall down in here. Do it on both sides of the machine because this is the same story on the other side. Yeah. So that's kind of my message with this, is to make sure that this is tied up somehow.
Another thing to check quickly, in here there's a paddle that's your return load in your funnel. I've seen it where all of a sudden the funnel goes right to the max, and you'll check it, but there's no product in it. And what will happen is sitting over winter, I've seen these paddles seize, and they won't move anymore. So just have a quick look, pop this cover off, make sure that is free and moving, and make sure the pin hasn't moved out as well. I've seen that paddle completely gone. So just as taking it out of the shed, have a quick look at that.
Yep. Yep, that swinging paddle is how it measures tailings load. Just a couple of service points up here. Up here is our loading auger system. There's a gearbox down here with oil in it to check or change, probably be changed annually. It's just gear lube in there. And then there's a clean out door here, and then there's actually one on the bottom here. Rain can be an interesting scenario with this, whether you have a power folding top or not. Rain can collect in the grain tank. And if you get a long period of time where you get quite a bit of rain, and if the machine is sitting out in it, it can build up in the bottom there. Now, I've seen and heard of situations where water can actually get deep enough on there where it can actually find its way through the seal down into the gearbox. And then when you go to open that guy up right there and let that water out, you'll get a big bath.
You'll get a bath.
You'll get a bath. If that's the case, what I would do is I would check the fluid in that gearbox. If you find water in there, change it. It's probably a good idea to check it in that scenario. If you find a bunch of water in there. If there's no water in there and the oil looks good, you're probably okay. But it's something to check if it sits in a long period of time out in the rain. Speaking of the unloading auger, so we've got a gearbox down here. I'm going to ask everybody out there, is there another gearbox in the unloading auger system? The elbow. So up in the top in the overhead auger in the elbow, there's a gearbox in there and it has oil in it. So don't forget about that when you're doing your checkovers. There's an access door up there and you can get into it and you can check it. So just don't forget about it. Okay, so we talked about these little tailings doors earlier. Those get installed in this housing right here. This is one of those little windows that I talked about that you can open up to get in there and inspect. Little tip with those, make sure that they're there and that they're done up. I've seen machines where we've been chasing, we're trying to figure out why there's a leak in the field, why there's a trail of grain in the field, and we chase it up to the combine and find one of those just loose. Close that up and away we go. So there's 2 of them on each one, so just make sure you check those. Batteries are under here. They're accessed by removing all the little rubber straps. You have to actually remove the clean grain, the shoe drive belt, I'm sorry. But there's an over center mechanism on here. All you need is a crescent wrench and it just pops right off. And then you can get right into the batteries. Now, the reason why I bring this up is there is actually some fuses in here. There's fuses in the cab, but there is a fuse panel under here, and the chart for it is right here on the door. So there is some fuses down here. We didn't take the door off, but it is in there. The main gearbox up here, I'll just climb up here and show you where it is. Up in here, there is a sight glass in here to check the fluid in there. Right there. Got it? Okay. So there's 2 lines there. There's a red line and a green line. You want to make sure that the fluid is between those 2 lines. You don't want to be overfilled or underfilled. Sight glass. Every day. You should check it every day.
Hot or cold? Hot or cold?
Cold. Cold. Beginning of the morning.
Another note, we've seen scenarios where you will get a high temp alarm. And sometimes it is actually caused by the gearbox being overfilled.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind. It is pretty crucial that it is between those 2 lines.
Yep.
And when you check it, like any fluid level, make sure your combine's sitting on level ground, because that can change things a lot too. So
Yep. That's why I mentioned that it has to be in that range, because underfilled, overfilled, it can cause heating problems.
yeah. Something else to mention. Typically, a lot of people will, at the end of the season, change oil, do their servicing, or prior to. Just have a quick look that all these valves are closed on your oil pan, hydraulic gearbox valves. Just to double check, right? It takes 2 seconds to have a look to make sure that they're all closed off. Another note, up in this area as well, is you got your 2 rotor gearbox. So on the back side of each rotor, there is a gearbox specifically for that rotor. And there's sight glasses on them. So make sure you got good oil levels in those as well. And that there's no, that area is clean of debris and any straw residual. And that there's no oil leaks on those rotor gearboxes. Check your owner's manual for recommended hours of oil change intervals on those gearboxes. Sometimes they get kind of forgotten. They're not the nicest area, but if you have any questions, please call your local service department.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to mention before we kind of move away from this area was this rear door in here gives you access to the separating area of the rotor, but it also gives you access to the pre-sieve, because the pre-sieve is accessed through there. So if you need to get at it to calibrate it, look at it, clean it, you can get at it through these rear doors on either side of the combine for inspection and for checking it.
Yeah.
Okay, where should we go next here?
Chopper, yes, I don't know.
Chopper, you want to talk about the chaff spreaders there?
Sure. So on,
You want me to let them down?
yeah. So as John spoke earlier, there's definitely over the years there's been different models, styles of chaff spreaders design. He spoke earlier about these covers on 2018 models, 2019 models. There has been an update to those covers. So I have seen those in those certain model years, those covers are starting to show some wear. So that helps with, make sure those covers are in good shape because that will increase spread width. So, yeah, I'm not sure what else.
This updated chaff spreader went on in 2018, and with it, we also got the ability to be able to adjust the speed of it from the cab. The old chaff spreader just had a valve on the side of the machine here, and pretty much everybody just turned it all the way up and just left it there because it only spread to 25, 30 feet. This chaff spreader design should spread to 45 feet, maybe even beyond. And it is adjustable from the cab. So you just adjust the speed of the spreaders to adjust the width of your spread. So you should be able to match your chaff out to the size of your header with this chaff spreader design.
I have seen in certain scenarios, going back to alluding to the speed, in canola, I've seen it where if these are running at full RPM, they will change the flow or the air pressure of the shoe. And I've seen it where they'll actually suck canola off the shoe because they're turning too fast. So bear that in mind. That's a good opportunity to, if you're doing a drop test, is maybe you have that set at 700 RPM and try it. But then maybe try dropping it down 200 RPM and go to about 500 and see if your loss changes, if you're struggling with your sieve loss.
Yeah, they're an airflow based type of a fan, so they draw a lot of air, and when they're up, they draw from inside the combine. So yeah, it can cause an issue there if you're not careful. Only run them as fast as you need.
Yeah. Venture into the chopper.
Chopper's kind of hard to see. I mean, this is the body of it here. The belt is underneath this big shield here. There is a high-low on it. Really, in Western Canada, we don't even talk about low. It's kind of more just for corn. We pretty much just leave it in high and don't ever change it. These combines will go to their grave with the paint still on the low-speed shiv. So I never looked in there. Is this a 4 or a 6-row chopper? I'm not even sure.
4.
I think it's just a 4. Okay. This one does have, from the looks of things, does it have the remote?
No,
system?
manual.
It's just manual?
Manual
Okay.
drop.
So this board can go up and down. Right now it's in the lowered position. In that position we would be dropping straw. Greg's going to put it up here. In the upper position, this is where you would be spreading in the chopping position. And then there was mention made earlier when we are dropping straw about being able to adjust the windrow that falls on the ground and is done with these fingers right here. You can narrow them up or they're out in the wide position right now. But all you would do is, and of course there's paint on them because they're new. I'm gonna stand in front of it here. There, and you can narrow them up to narrow up the windrow that's left on the ground.
So underneath here as well,
You're good.
there's adjustments for your tail fins. So you can change your spread pattern on the go from the cab. On this machine, they're cab controlled. Other machines, they're manual control. One thing about the cab controlled ones is this track will generally fill up with chaff. So I recommend anyone that is using this feature daily, part of your maintenance in the morning, make sure that's blown out and cleared out. Because what will happen is if, say you shut down at night, you get 3 days of rain, we can only hope for that this year. You'll get a buildup in there. And that chaff, when you come back, your fins, tail fins will not move. They'll go to one position, and they'll sit there and give you alarms in the cab. So kind of make it a daily ritual that you're cleaning that track out, blowing it out.
Yep. And then you have this ability to lift this board up to get in here and clean too, so with a leaf blower or whatever you use.
So a couple things just before we run away there. Chopper knives. Here's a couple examples of chopper knives that are probably, this could have been 200 hours worth last year. Yeah, just different varieties. So if your knife looks like that, please get them flipped. I mean, you got the opportunity to use the other side yet, so take the time, flip your chopper knives. If both sides are gone, time for new knives. On some of the chopper knives as well, not all of them, but there'll be a set of wind knives as well, and that gives you your spread. That creates that force coming out of the chopper to get your full spread. So if you can look up inside the chopper here quickly, you should be able to see that set of wind knives. You can see the straight blades, and then you can see the other wind knives. And those wind knives are just as crucial as the chopper knives. So
There's the wind knife right there.
I replaced what was on it. So if there was a wind knife there, I'd put one on. I wouldn't. Same thing. The choppers are kind of balanced as well. They're built with that amount of chopper knives and wind knives. So I don't know if I'd be removing or replacing, but maybe John.
OptiSpread will have all straights.
Yeah.
OptiSpread should be all straights. Yeah. But yeah, I would just put the same pattern back in that was there.
Pattern, yeah.
Yeah.
And there is also left and right wind knives as well. So if you're going to parts to get them, just remember that you need a left and a right set. So.
You want your knives to last longer. You don't have to have that bar in all the way.
Yeah.
I run them right about here.
Yeah.
You can get 2 years out of them that way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the, so what he's pointing at here is this is actually the adjustment for the stationary knives and how deep they are in there. Right now they're in the mid position. So you've got 3 positions here. Okay, we want to
Might as well.
talk about that moisture sensor now.
Just as a quick service note, this is the main rotor drive belt. Every CR combine has got, there's been different belts, different shivs, but the idea is still that's the rotor drive, main rotor drive. There's a high and low shifter lever. They have come out with an updated lever, I see. So if you got like a 2018 to 2020, 2021 actually.
19 and 20.
19 and 20?
Yep.
They had a flat bar in there. And those flat bars would have a tendency of bending if you weren't cautious trying to get it in high or low range. So they have come out with an updated handle. Check with your parts department. That's just been a new release, so you should.
There is instructions in the assist system on how to modify the flat bar one and make it work too.
Yeah.
So
Service intervals, the front shiv shows 10-hour grease nipples, but the back shiv only shows 50. Grease them daily. Do them both. I wish they'd take that 50-hour sticker and put a 10-hour on there. Grease your rotors daily. And please, make sure you speed them up, slow them down. Speed them up, slow them down, and reset them. There is a grease procedure on some combines that you can go in there and hit. It's under your procedure tab, and it will move the variators themselves. So after you've greased them. So just, yeah, make it a daily event.
yep.
You gonna go through the camera? Or?
Yeah. So down here we have this box right here is our moisture sensor. The moisture sensor itself is actually this little guy right here. There's a nut here and a nut here. If you take those off, you pull it out, there's like a steel fin that's on there. And that's the actual sensor itself. There's a clean out auger in there. We've taken it out here already. It goes up in here. You take that out, clean it out. Now, what can happen in here is Pease is a good example of this because they like to get jammed in there and stall the auger out, and then it'll pop the fuse. On combines up until last year, so I want to say even model year 19 combines had this. If you were non-automation and in anything older than that, they all had a inline fuse up back here behind the elevator in the harness. It was a 5-amp fuse. Starting in, I want to say it was 19.
I think so, yeah.
I think it was in model year 19. It might have been when the automation come around. So if you have a combine with automation, there's no fuse out here. The fuse is actually in the panel in the cab. And I believe it's called bypass motor or auger or something like that. Yeah. I think it's a 20-amp fuse. I cannot remember the amperage on it. Or maybe it's a 15. I don't remember, but either way, the story is that it is actually in the fuse panel in the cab with automation combines. But you service this the same way as we have all along. If this jams up, you need to pull it out, clean it out, and that sort of thing. With the automation combines now, we have this grain cam. Now we've taken it off and it's just kind of hanging on the harness here, but this is the grain cam. It's just pinned on the side of the moisture sensor. So that's where it's taken its pictures for the automation. It's actually in the moisture meter. So, some issues that can arise here. Number one, if the bypass motor isn't running, if you've got something in there that's jammed at like a rock or a pea or whatever, and that bypass motor isn't running, the automation's not going to see a fresh sample. And your moisture sensor isn't going to work, so you're going to have two things that aren't working. And the lens on this camera sometimes has been known to get a little bit dirty. Usually it's related to dust and static. Mud, any of those kinds of scenarios, I've never had an issue with mud or wet grain getting stuck to it, but I don't know, maybe there's the odd place that it's happened, but for the most part, I believe it's been dust, and static has been more the issue with it.
I had a scenario last year with straight cutting canola. The canola stalks would not cure, and they were very green. And I had a customer called, complaints about his automation no longer working. I went out, first thing I did was pull his camera, and it was completely green. That camera could not read anything, and
Okay, there you go.
it took quite a bit to get that product off there. I actually, cleaning those, just take a soft cloth and a little bit of water, and that's the best solution to clean them up, wipe them off, and yeah, go again.
Okay, there you go. That's a first for me. I've never heard of that one.
Yep.
Okay.
His moisture meter fin also looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
So.
So the moisture meter needed to be cleaned too, and treat it with the same. Be as delicate with it too.
Yep.
Get it cleaned up and yeah. Okay. So that's the moisture meter. It's kind of dual purpose now. They're like with the camera for the automation being there. It's part of the program there now too. So. Okay, part of the automation as well. Now you can't see it, but they do have air pressure sensors inside the cleaning shoe. What we're doing there is we're measuring air pressure above and below the top sieves. So essentially what it can do is we're measuring load on the shoe. And the automation uses that as part of the algorithm, how to figure out how to keep the combine set. They're hard to see because they're tucked up in there, but they are actually measuring air pressure in the cleaning shoe.
So something along those lines. If you are a fan of your pressure washer, and some people are, there's been scenarios where we're doing some winter combining when we don't want to be, and you have to get the pressure washer in there. Those pressure sensors, they're just on the top of the top sieve towards the rear. Take a chunk of duct tape and put over top of those before you go in there with your pressure washer, because once those sensors fill up with water, you're replacing them. And the parts department will be happy to sell them to you again. So.
Yeah. It's always a good idea to pull the sieves if you need to do that kind of washing.
No maintenance to really do on them throughout the season?
Really, most of your maintenance is going to be right here.
Just cleaning.
It's cleaning this. And for the most part, it's not going to give you a lot of trouble.
Those don't get dirty?
The pressure sensors? No.
I haven't had troubles with them.
No.
No.
Can you spray that camera with anti-static to help a bit?
Yeah, and so the question is can we spray the camera with anti-static? And the answer is I don't think I would spray it right on the lens. I'd maybe spray it on the outside of it if you wanted to do something like that. But that's an interesting scenario. One thing that I do recommend is that if it is covered with dust, don't just take a rag and wipe it, because a rag has a lot of static in it, and you could actually end up making the static worse.
Yeah.
You get it clean, you get going again, it's dirty again in 20 minutes, and you're out there doing it again. What I have found is an air compressor. To blow it off tends to work better. Now, if you don't have the air compressor on the combine, where do you get one, right? But what I recommend is just those keyboard dusters from Staples. Just keep a can of that in your cab, and you can just blow it off with that. Because those are supposed to be anti-static as well. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I don't know. I've got limited experience sitting in the cab. There's some people that have sat in these cabs for hundreds of hours with these things. I don't know if anybody else has got any other suggestions for that, but that was kind of my thought.
Yeah, I've had more issues with stuff sticking to them.
Okay.
But that's my area, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
every area scenario will be different.
Yeah.
But the dust sticks worse because of the static.
Yeah.
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 Seems worse in canola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never had a warning come up with anything else but canola.
Yeah.
Canola. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it can depend on the year too.
I mean, it's a glass lens, so an anti-static should be fine, but I don't.
Yeah.
Hey, John, did you mention that you don't have to stop as soon as it plugs on? Versus you don't have to stop immediately once it dusts up now? You can go.
Yes, there is this feature, I think it's built into the software now, where it does limit the ability of it, but it doesn't completely shut the system off if it does show that it's dirty. So you can get to the end of the row or something and get to where you get out of the way so that you can, if you've got multiple machines in the field, so you're not stopping the whole operation for you to clean your camera, right? So.
One problem I had last year was in canola, and I'm pretty sure my calibrations were correct. I reset it, get it where I wanted, pretty quick, fill up with canola pods, eh? Kept doing it to me, so I finally went on manual so I could keep it. Then I talked to Greg about it, he said, well, you should have used that stops where it won't go below a certain point on the calibration.
Okay.
And that was something that I wish I'd known sooner type of thing,
Oh, you're talking on the pre-sieve.
on the preset.
Yeah.
Like on the range tabs.
The range tab,
Yeah.
yeah. You can set some limits in there, yeah.
So the question was from the customer. He was talking of the parameters that the automation wanted were bigger than he wanted to allow. He was struggling with pods in the combine coming through to the grain tank. So in about 2020, I think it was, they added into the software, there's ranges in there. So basically everything other than your concave setting, you can adjust and give it a minimum and a maximum setting. So in the example with the pods coming into the grain tank, what was happening is the pre-sieve would open up too far. So in that scenario, you can set your pre-sieve so it only opens no more than 3/16 of an inch if you want. And you could set it at a minimum of 1/8. So that's a perfect example where the automation is only as good as the information we give it. And now that we got those range tabs, we can set those parameters for the automation. And it's been a learning curve for everyone. And we're, as dealers and as customers, we're starting to understand this system more and more.
Yeah.
And it's changed my way of setting a combine as well.
Yeah.
So.
And with that point, I do come back to the point I made earlier when I was talking about the cleaning shoe is with automation, it's very key that the pre-sieve and the upper sieve are calibrated correctly, especially in canola. Close enough isn't good enough. It's got to be bang on. Then I would start doing that. I wouldn't just automatically just start limiting it. I would make sure that it's set right.
The reason I think it was right is when I set it manually where I wanted it, it was right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sort of told me that it was right.
Yeah.
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 There has been scenarios too as well that we've had combines that we've had to come out and pull piano wires out of the pre-sieves. Pre-sieve and upper sieve they're too tight. They work fine brand new. You start getting build up of chaff in the sieves, and those motors, those Lin actuators don't have enough power to open and close them. So we've had scenarios where pre-sieves won't close. They'll stay locked at a certain position. So yeah, just bear that in mind, please. If you have a combine that is, you cannot move the pre-sieve, please let us know.
Yep.
Because we do have cures for this, so. Yeah, I guess moving on. Combine's been sitting for the winter. Just check your half moons on the end of your grain tank. That's one of the ones that you'll see the trail of grain in the field at some point. So, been there, done that. Takes a long time to fill them up. There's a lot of grain comes out of there in a short time. Guess we really didn't talk about the tensioner on the clean grain.
I did kind of mention it earlier, but yeah, that tensioner is right here for the chain tension on the elevator chain. This is that tensioner right here.
Any other questions over here on this side, or?
Chad, have we got any other questions coming from elsewhere?
I guess we could talk about the DSP.
We could talk about that a little bit more, yeah.
Yep. I guess you want to lead into the.
So on this side here, this is our drive for the DFR system, dynamic feed roller. We're on the bigger pulley right now. That is the low speed drive. And that's actually the way it comes from the factory now starting this year. So it's in the position that I recommend that we run it in now. To change it, you actually have to physically change the belt. And there is a second belt that comes with the machine. You would undo the tensioners, you take the belt off, you remove the outside pulley, and then you can put the other pulley on for high speed. High speed's 1100 RPM. And low is 640. I recommend 640 for a number of different reasons, and the biggest one is that it turns this drum approximately the same speed that the chain is moving at. So it just, we're not trying to use it as an accelerator. It's more there for stone protection, but it is there for feeding as well too, and there's no need to use it as an accelerator. It should be there just to kind of help keeping the product moving along, and at that speed, it's a good speed to match the feeder chain. So there is a reverser option for this as well. We don't have it on this machine. It would mount in this area right here. There'd be like a cylinder that would sit here. And then there's like a crown gear and a ratchet that goes on, and it's operated by the computer. There's no need to get out of the cab with it if it's needed, and it is actually optional to add after the fact if you don't get it from the factory. And this is model year 19 and on only. So model years 18 and older will not take the reverser from the factory.
But I caution, if you have that feature, if that stops, there's a reason. So caution, just hitting the procedure button and backing it up. There could be a big rock jammed in there. So yeah, just be cautious on that. The other thing to double check is there's two tensioners on the main drive belt and the I can jump up here. This tensioner and that tensioner, check those daily. We want to make sure that they are within spec on the guide. I tell people at my clinics that if there's any belt that you over tension by a little bit, it's these two belts. And it will save you a lot of grief when that 8, 9 o'clock at night comes and you're wondering if you should be going home. You might get a couple more hours, so because it's been a fantastic feature, and lots of times it will stop rotors from plugging. So I always say sometimes if the DFR stops, it's a good thing. It gives you that opportunity to deal with it up front rather than behind. So
yeah.
So any other questions? Got a quiet crowd.
Means we must have done our job.
There's nothing up top there that's,
Not in the last couple of years, no. Up top? Nothing up top that's changed. Nothing that's changed in the last year or two, no.
Actually, I'll maybe just touch on one thing. At the top of the clean grain elevator, we've had some times where we've had canola leakage. So if you go out and you're going to go start combining canola, combine a little ways and then please get out, have a look, see if there's any canola laying around in this area here. That's a perfect opportunity to, if you see canola, we probably have something we got to deal with at the top of the clean grain elevator. And that could have been, maybe you had a yield sensor changed or that top cover had been taken off. It might be just as simple as a little bit of silicone, and we'll try to prevent as many of those situations as possible and get it fixed before you have a rotor belt issue. So.
Hey John, thought about that chain there? Like I think on my combine it goes up over top of that island.
This chain here.
Yeah. Is that the right way, like how it is?
I've had that debate. So the question is this chain right here and the idler and the orientation of it. Greg, what's your take on this? What do you guys do? Because I have some dealers that take this right away and put it on top. I look at it as this is coming from the factory set that way for a reason. I don't know the exact reason why. I mean, school of thought is that that's incorrect. But
I know on previous combines, like the legacy combines where you had dual chains there, I always struggled if the chain was on top to keep it tight. It was always trying to push that tensioner down because your chain would come off this sprocket, then have to make a big circuit like that. And I always had troubles on those ones keeping it tight in there because there was always that down force on that bolt. So
personally, I think the main reason why they do this is because of the reverser. So you think when it's running normally, it's pulling on the top side, right?
Yep.
But when you go to put it into reverse, you're actually going to pull on the bottom side. And if you run it over the top, as soon as you tension that up, it's going to go loose. It's going to push the tensioner off.
Yep.
With it like this, it won't do that. That's my thought process as to why they do it. Is because when it's in reverse, you're going to be pulling down here, and it won't loosen off then. And that's usually why on those older machines that had the dual chains in here, that's why we went to a belt with a tensioner here and a tensioner here, so it's tight on both sides. So that when you put it in reverse, because with a belt, if you only put the tensioner on one side, as soon as it goes in reverse, it'll just slip.
loosens up.
It won't even loosen; it'll just slip because it'll pull on the wrong side, and the tensioner just goes limp. And then the belt, it'll just spin. So you have to have a tensioner on both sides. So that's my thought process as to why they do that here too. Because the reverser is just on this jack shaft just inside here, right? So the reverser pulls through this belt and through that chain.
Kind of makes sense.
Nobody's ever really explained it to me, but just standing there looking at it, that's really the only thing that makes sense to me.
this grease nipple here, it says 200 hours.
Take a chisel and a hammer and smoke it off.
If you want, take a pen and mark down your hours when you grease this. And do not do it any time before that. Because that clutch will, if you run around and grease that every 50 hours, you're going to have troubles with it. So,
Yeah, you'll pump the clutch full of grease.
so at the most, once a year, that's it. Oh yeah.
That grease out.
That's the other thing. Where's the reverser? It's underneath there, right? Not the easiest thing to get at You got to get on your hands and knees and crawl underneath and get to it. And at the end of the day, when you come to the corner of the field and you take off for the night, what do you do with your header? And usually you lower it right to the ground, right? Well, it makes it even harder to get in there. So quite often what will happen is you'll be walking around with your grease gun and go, I'll get it next time. I'm too lazy to get down there. Problem is next time is another 50 hours. So a week later, and you come back and go, crap. Do I feel like doing it today? So does it actually get done as often as it needs to? Who knows?
That's another one that could be done daily.
This is what I'm going to tell you, is that there's nothing in there that you can hurt with a grease gun. You can grease that daily. And in fact, I recommend it. Or as often as you can.
There's 3.
There's 2 or 3 in there, actually. Actually, there's 3 on the one collar, and then there's 2 or 3 spots that you got to grease.
They put 3 there, so at least you get 1.
If you can get 1 or 2, yeah, that's all you need. But then there's another spot, there's another one you got to grease under there too. So grease it. Then when you're done greasing your rotor drive, and you're sitting there waiting for that to speed up and slow down, or when you're done doing that, reach over and turn on the reverser. Because when you turn on the reverser, it shifts that collar back and forth on that spline, and it smears all that new grease over that spline and keeps it moving. Because that's where those fail.
And if you're pulling your combines out, check your reverser that shaft is moving. Right?
Do it as soon as you come out of the shed with it.
Yeah.
Grease the living you-know-what out of it. And move it and run it and back and forth and grease it and run it and move it. And if you get underneath there and it's a big ball of grease and mess, get under there with a hot pressure washer and clean the whole thing out and then start greasing it. Get it all cleaned up and free and moving. Because that's where most of our failures happen there is, okay, so it's a 50-hour grease, right? Well, you're cutting wheat for 2 weeks. Well, I'm not using it. Why should I grease it? That's exactly why you should grease it, because you're not running it and you're not using it, because it's just sitting there with all that grease out, all exposed, and it's getting covered with chaff and straw and whatever else. And then when you get your canola, and what happens? You go to the first field that you swathed, right? And the first field you swathed is usually the worst one because you forgot how to run the swather from the year before, so there's lumps in the opening round, and you need the reverser. Is the reverser going to work when you get there? So that's kind of my story, is you need to grease it more when you're not using it and keep that spline and that collar moving.